recording.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to call this evening's Corcoran Planning Commission meeting to order. We do have a quorum. I'll take a roll. Drummond?
Here.
Horn?
Here.
Lind?
Here.
Vandenide?
Here.
And Lanterman is present. I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioners and staff, are there any requested amendments to the agenda?
I have no changes, Mr. Chair.
Any changes? No? Okay. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
A motion to approve the agenda?
Okay, we
And I'll
have a
second.
motion. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. I'd like to open the floor to the public to participate in the open forum. This is an opportunity to address the commission on items not already on the agenda. And I'll note that we have no one in person tonight.
Correct.
Okay.
We're only taking in-person comments at this time.
Okay. Then, and thank you. We will move on then.
Before you move on, Commissioner, could I use this as an opportunity just to address the commission, since I don't see another great opportunity on the agenda?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jay Tobin. I'm the new city administrator for the city of Corcoran. I started yesterday. I am coming from the city of Shakopee, where I served as the Parks and Recreation Director for the last 5 years. Prior to that, I served as the finance manager for the city of Chaska for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was in the military for 28.5 years. And so I got into city government because my last job in the military, I worked for an organization called Installation Management Command, where I was a deputy, and I ran programs and services for 77 communities globally. And so that was my introduction into municipal government. So when I retired 7.5 years ago, it seemed like a really good way to go, and it's been a great ride ever since. I've been married for almost 29 years to the amazing Robin, 2 birds, a Jay and a Robin. So you never forget that. And we have 4 amazing kids. And part of the reason we came back here is because my wife is from Minnesota. She's from New Brighton. And so we wanted to get close to family. But also we wanted to get close to the values that I grew up on a farm in southern Wisconsin, the values that I grew up with. And so I'm excited to join the city of Corcoran because I see those values already demonstrated in the decisions being made and the vision being cast. So thank you for having me here, and thank you for the work that you're doing for the city.
Well, thank you and welcome aboard. Happy to have you. Thank you for your background. Are there any questions for our new city manager?
Just curious, which branch of the military?
I was in the Marine Corps for 6 years, and then the rest was in the Army. So I was enlisted in the Marine Corps, and then I was commissioned as an officer in the Army.
Okay,
Thank you for your service.
absolutely.
So with that, I'm going to ask whether or not any commissioners have any questions or comments about the minutes from the September 2022 regular meeting. Any comments? No? Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. I'd like to ask the commissioners if there are any questions or comments with respect to the minutes of the October 2023 meeting. No? Okay. Then with that, Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the October 2023 meeting?
I motion to approve the minutes from the October meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Natalie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully we have a fairly quick meeting tonight. The first item, we have a nice title slide to help guide us, but that is it. So basically, you have a 2023 draft annual report in your packet. And staff would like to hear from you as to what priorities you would like forwarded to council for 2024 for their consideration. That's all I have for you.
Any comments?
Mr. Chair, I do have one, barring any, and I guess I'm not entirely certain if it becomes a priority, but it is something that I feel like we're dancing around the edges, and that, so I'm just going to put it out there and you can give me guidance. So I know that recently, with some of the changes in ordinances, like specifically with trying to drive the natural resources map, like what's on there, and that has to guide development that's considered for those areas where there's natural resources. I mentioned at a meeting a while ago when we were considering Red Barn Pet Retreat, there was a chunk of land that isn't really treed right now, and we were considering whether or not we were going to require the tree standards, the tree planting standards to be applied to that outlot. And at the time I said, well, I don't want to plant trees just for trees. And I feel like I need to clarify that statement because I am all for trees. But what I'm wondering is there a way that the natural environment can guide the development of certain plots more than just the homogenization of standards? And I don't know that there's a way, but like we have our tree planting standards, we have like you know, this many number, this many shrubs, right? But I feel like then every certain plot ends up looking like it's supposed to, and our only hope of maintaining environmental distinction is however much that natural resources map guides or influences the development. And so maybe you're going to tell me, nope, we really just have to go, because I understand you can't be ambiguous when working with developers, like they need to know what the standards are. But I'm just trying to figure out if there's any way that we can preserve specifically a variation of environmental landscapes. So, you know, where we have tall prairie, for instance, or something, is there a way to preserve that rather than just requiring tree plantings because that's kind of our lot design standard?
Mr. Chair.
Please, thank you.
Commissioner Brumman, I think we're talking about maybe two slightly but interrelated items. So you're talking about the natural resources map that we have. Really, that typically it comes into play more with planned unit development negotiations more than anything else. We do use it as a tool to talk with developers on a standard plat as well and see if there's a way that, you know, is there a way to move it around there? But typically, it's more of a negotiation tool with our planned unit development applications. As far as Red Barn Pet Retreat, for example, that was a standard plat, and so there were really no negotiations in terms of the landscaping standards. So what I think you might be saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is there a way to give them tree planting credit when they do preserve existing trees, or to your point, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be trees, but prairie as well, some other environment on the site that's existing. Am I capturing that correctly, or am I missing something?
I do appreciate that you made the distinction between the planned unit developments and then a standard plat. And I think, like, I don't exactly know how we would do it, because I also don't know if it's even possible within the fact that, like, there have to be standards. I guess I just, what I'm seeing as more and more development proposals come in or plats get developed out is that there's just, like, everything looks the same, right? Or the same types of plantings go in. And I'm just wondering if there's some way, and maybe it's affiliated with, like, I mean, this is specifically what we'll talk about next is specifically about the industrial and commercial, but kind of overall, is there a way to just allow for variation? And then that's that tricky place where you want variation, but you also have to have standards, so maybe it's not possible, but yes. Like, I would love to see other types of environmental, like, habitats preserved rather than just kind of like, and I don't, a lot of it is farm right now too, and so maybe we just don't even know what it was before it was once farmland. And so that would be hard to even date back to what kind of an environment is it supposed to be.
So what we could look at as a priority, I mean, staff has forwarded priorities to council recently to it, and I think the last couple of years, we've had, at least the last couple of years, we've had landscaping standards on there. We tend to get a no from council when we talk about a standardized preservation ordinance, but maybe some kind of credit for, so what they're concerned about is like a penalty approach.
Sure.
So maybe if there was some more of a benefit approach with our landscaping standards, that could
Okay.
potentially be something evaluated, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Okay. And I know that it's not a single strand, because I also know that what we were talking about, we have brought up before, tree preservation clause is a difficult thing to enforce and that, or even require. And then we've also talked about how even the open space and preservation is sort of driving a requirement to have homeowners associations. So I know it's not a single strand. I was just, barring any other priorities coming from, I was going to take the advantage to try to just say, again, not so much because we don't want to have a standard, but because it would be, to preserve a variety of
Right.
natural landscapes, right?
Was
That's
any
all.
of that in that? I know we were debating if it was going to be scores. We had all those like things where you could be like, oh, this is worth 50 points, this is worth 20 points. I can't remember what it was called, the design guidelines or something. I can't remember what it was.
Commissioner Van, that was one of the drafts for the plan unit development. It had points tied to it as a potential way to review those applications.
Yeah.
We ended up as a city not going with the points
Right.
per se. We have more of a policy that does not have points assigned, but does have the benefits we're looking for when we process those applications.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was maybe, I couldn't remember if something like that was in there to be like, and this is something we would really like you to do or something.
I definitely think so. I'm just wondering if there's a way to drive it as an increased priority, right? Rather than like or to drive it home as something that occurs more regularly. Maybe it's not a priority, but rather than just one of multiple options. And again, it's barring anything else. I just was not going to let an opportunity for us to come together and not have any kind of throw them out there.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is potentially looking at our landscaping standards with specific questions. How can we preserve more diversity in environmental habitats? Potentially some kind of a tree credit for, I'm saying tree credit.
Sure, I hear.
We talked
Yep.
about that
Yep.
before as a city, and I think that's something that council has talked about before in terms of if there's already so many trees on the site, why are we making them plant X amount more? Could there be a credit for an existing tree to help kind of encourage that preservation? So I think so I'm not trying to put that word into
Sure,
your mouth,
yep.
but I think maybe it goes with that conversation potentially. I don't know if you had any further thoughts you wanted to share, Kendra?
No, I think what I hear you saying also, though, is it's not just about trees, it is
Right.
about the prairies and
Yes.
how do
Right.
we give credit for a prairie preservation? Is it something the city council wants to
Right,
preserve?
sure.
Because we also have the balance of, from a
Yep.
habitat perspective, fantastic. From a screening from neighbors, not so great.
Sure.
So I think it's a balancing act. But I think those are great things to look at as part of a landscape
Okay.
ordinance, which, if that's a priority, that could certainly be incorporated.
I did hear a phrase, Natalie, too, that I thought was helpful, environmental distinction and variation. I think that's a helpful phrase when you talk about your different landscaping opportunities. And in some places, you're not worried about trying to create a barrier. In some cases, you really are trying to capture the spirit of the space.
Yes, thank you.
Well, one of the things that makes Corcoran unique is the natural environment that we're blessed to have in this community, correct? So I think that kind of ties into it. Is there ways that we can address the fact that there's existing natural habitat that exists, and can we supplement that instead of just putting in rows of trees and the typical landscaping that happens as a part of development? Because we are unique as a community that way, that we've got some natural environment benefits that not every community has.
I was just wondering, and I'm not saying I want to do that, I was just curious, thinking about like these, like, I don't know, some people have like almost like community farms where it's like the farm is used by a lot of different people and they have little sections of it and they can, I don't know, I think it's some of the Hmong have them or something like that. Is that something that we would want to, I'm just thinking of like farms seem to be going, like any chance there was a chance to sell them, they sell them and they, because they can make a lot of money. Is that something that's worth, is there any benefit to that we could make that to try to keep some of this stuff around, you know what I mean, where we might be able to actually allow people who don't have the land to be able to actually grow things on a farm?
So do you mean a community farm or a community garden?
Is that, I don't know the difference. I suppose a garden is a lot smaller than a farm. I don't really know the difference, I suppose. These guys, what I've seen, they have like little tractors out there and they're farming them.
That's farming. Commissioner Van Den Eyde, I think that if the question is, can we use city land for that? I think
No, just encouraging it in some ways. Is it, make it beneficial
To
to,
legalize what's happening south of Shamrock, or not Shamrock.
Probably.
Pheasant Run Golf
Right.
Course. And there's a couple of, the guy out on the
On 19.
west side of
Yep.
town, they're doing it.
yeah.
And we get complaints regularly about it.
But
So I
isn't
think,
that part, because there are some of those specific instances because there's illegal habitation or
right,
structures? Okay.
but that's all related. So
I
I
see,
think
I see.
I would call it still community garden. Community garden can be defined differently. And so that is something, if you wanted to look at, that we could, because we are silent on it in our code. And a lot of cities recently have adopted regulations for what's happening up in a couple places. I think there's a few more in town that are doing that too. I think it's I mean, we are an agricultural community, so I think thinking about how to do that in a way that is safe. We've gotten complaints before because the farmers would park on the road, not off. And then we have the accessory structures issue, so there are some related issues that I think if the commission wanted, that certainly is within your purview of planning.
And beyond that, beyond just a community garden, which a lot of folks do, there is this new concept called an agrihood, which is like a neighborhood in which you're building your neighborhood around shared spaces with the intentionality of co-farming collaboratively. It's happening in a couple places in the United States. We also call it an agritopia.
I feel like something like that in Corcoran would be amazing.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned it because I was saving it for when we got to the the other part. But the deal, and I know I've brought this up before, and I know it's not unique to our city, but I just feel like I don't know where else to bring it. I've tried bringing it other places, but agriculture is the only zoning that is not driven by the city. It is driven by the landowner, and that just does not make sense to me. And at least as far as I know, because I've asked this question before, and it's like there's no denoted, there's rural residential, but once those individuals sell, if they are preserved, then their land is no longer, if they don't fill out the application to be considered an agriculture, then the land is no longer distinguished as agriculture. But we zone as a city, industrial, light industrial, commercial, and then residential, and I just don't understand that. And if now, I'm not saying that it's up to Corcoran to solve it, but if it follows suit, then all of agriculture is going to keep getting pushed away farther and farther from our metro areas, because that's what's happened. That's why there is no farming in Brooklyn Park. That's why there is no, farming in Minneapolis, right? So all that to say, that's just always, and I just don't bring it up because I expect a solution. Maybe you guys know something I don't know, but yeah.
Well, Commissioner Brumman, just to clarify, agriculture preserve, while it does put basically a covenant on the property that it can't be developed for so many years, it is ultimately, the reason why some farmers do it is because there's a tax break with it, and so there are a lot of farms that aren't necessarily ag preserved.
For
So,
sure.
but there's still, agriculture is still an allowed use in the rural residential.
Right,
So-
but what
Okay.
I'm saying is the city will create a zoning map, and nowhere in what the city denotes is there agricultural space.
You're saying an agricultural district that says this is agriculture only
Yes.
and is not
Yes.
subdividable for.
That's
And maybe
for
there's a
residential.
reason, you guys are so much more well-versed, like, there's probably a reason why that doesn't exist, at least to the best of my knowledge. And we don't need to spend now on understanding it, but I'll talk to you later about it. That doesn't necessarily make sense to me, and so maybe I have a massive blind spot and I'm missing something, but,
Well, I think right now, every property that hasn't been subdivided, that's in the rural residential has development rights. And so we would be essentially talking about taking away development rights. So that, I think, could be difficult to do at this stage. It's been a difficult program to change over the years. It was implemented in the 1980s, and there's been some changes, but most of the changes have resulted in granting people more rights, and so when you take some away, that can be a sensitive topic.
and so that you feel like that's kind of the major stumbling block between why it's just not done in cities up to this point.
Off the top of my head,
Sure.
I would have to look into further. I think 1 in 10 tends to be the density rate for, at least in this area, for areas that are more rural that include agricultural uses. But I'm also interested to see what Kendra may have to say on the topic.
There are cities that have an agriculture zoning district that has an 80-acre minimum lot size, and that's all that can happen in there. But in the metro area, it's pretty rare because the farmers' 401k, I've heard several of our
Right,
residents
is
call
their
it.
land.
I mean, we're in the metro area,
Yep.
and they know if their kids aren't going to farm, that is their plan. So I think since we've adopted that, it's challenging. Not to say it can't be done, because it does happen in Minnesota. There are agricultural zoning districts that's all that is, and it's a large lot size.
But most of those zoning districts don't have the opportunity for development.
Right.
So that's a way for them to get tax breaks.
It also tends to be in areas that are identified as prime farming land, and the state doesn't identify, well, we do have farmers here, so
Sure.
I'm not saying they're not good farms. They're not
based on
identified like
soil.
some of the farms,
Okay.
soils in the southern part of the metro.
I just, as somebody who lives near an ever-growing metro area, especially on the heels of what we saw happen to the food system, right, in 2020, I just think that it is important to try to preserve, so whether it's through these agri-hoods or these, developing standards for these shared farms or community gardens, whatever, I would find that to be something that's significant because it makes food accessible to people in the community where it's grown and where they live. And so I think it is a valuable asset to a community.
It was just a reference for that.
Oh, thank you. He's sending me information on agri-hoods, so. So I think we could put evaluating community farms, gardens, to see how we can improve. I think we could add that as a priority.
Yeah, or these agri-hoods.
The thing with an agri-hood is it's got to be a developer initiative. So
Right.
it's a different strategy for how you're trying to build community within a particular development.
And I think our open space plat, our open space
Allows.
and preservation plat would allow for something like an agri-hood. So
Oh.
I think our ordinances are in line with that if someone were interested in doing that. I think where Kendra had pointed out was we are silent on community farms.
Yeah.
And so that could be an area where that could be improved.
So something like an agri-hood, if there was a PUD and they're like, hey, we're gonna have all this open space set aside, they could say, or could we allow that to be a garden area for the residents in the area?
So I believe in the rural residential, the open space and preservation plat would allow for something like that. And then I believe with our PUDs in our urban area, I believe it was specifically called out that community gardens and the like could be allowed in that open
That's
space
open space.
area.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll have to double check it, but I'm pretty sure that was one of the carve-outs.
It just seems like why wouldn't they allow that then,
Right.
or design it so that maybe we can do it? Okay.
So what is green acre property?
It's another tax program. So I am not involved with the Green Acres. So Ag Preserve, the city is in charge with doing some administration of that, and for whatever reason, Green Acres isn't. So I don't know there's some key differences, and I'm not too versed on the differences. I could probably tell you a little bit more off the bat what would be required for Ag Preserve, like you have to have 40 acres.
Do we have any green acre property
I'm
in
sure we do.
Corcoran?
We
I'm
do.
sure
We have a lot.
It's a requirement of 15 split-hooved animals specifically, so that those with horses cannot join the program. That was a change made,
A few years ago.
yes.
And
Yep,
it's a
and it's
10-acre
through the
minimum
county.
lot size. It
Yeah,
has to be 10 acres active agriculture.
And then by being a green acre property, there's tax benefits associated with that, where you don't get taxed at the higher developable property rate then?
That's right.
is a cumbersome program to try to navigate though, I will say that, just from but it's mostly with the county that you work.
Yeah, and that was for Ag Preserve. I think the city gets involved because we're basically saying this is not developable, and so we have to confirm that works with our land use maps and things like that. And so that one, I feel like that one is popular because it is a little less cumbersome, but it's still not without fault, so.
A couple additional comments I had on, if we're okay to move on. I'm glad to see storage uses in the scope for the review. An additional thought would be, are there any conditions or architectural standards or flexibility we want to put in place around a commercial or industrial building that wants to honor any existing historical architecture or something that's honoring the previous use of that commercial, area in the past? The reason I bring this up is I think about Hamel. I was in Hamel the other day shopping. The business, there's cute boutiques going in there. And they said, many of us in this block are trying to honor the fact that this used to be a building used for agriculture and design our business and the feel of the inside to kind of honor that. And I'm just curious if we have any notion around, when we're looking at our architectural standards, flexibility, if somebody's aiming to do something like that, or something in that regard. I know we talked about, residences, if they have a historical barn and want to match that and it doesn't meet the, the overhang requirement that we have in the city, we might have flexibility there. And for commercial use going forward, we may want to think about something like that.
Commissioner Lind, just to clarify, is this something you want to be a part of the commercial industrial update or one of the planning commission's 2024 priorities?
I don't know.
Okay.
What should it be?
Well, we could put it in either. We could put it in both if you wanted to. Just wanted to, for my notes, that's
It
all.
probably should be in the next item because it
Sure.
is specifically to talk about architectural standards in your work plan for I'm just reading.
Yep, yeah, it's in the scope with council for sure.
I'm
Okay,
looking,
so I
yeah.
can put that on a note, I can put that as a note for the commercial industrial feedback.
Okay. Another thing, sorry if I'm getting the agenda
No.
items confused, because
Not a problem. No, I
maybe
just
I'm
wanted to clarify.
confused. In regards to codes for setting up a business commercially in Corcoran, and I know, like, setting up sewer and water from the city, it's mentioned in here, the costs can be more than, they get more and more the more governance and more regulation we have around these things. Is there any way where if you're going to set up a commercial business, invest in the infrastructure to make that happen, and you'll have a commercial business next to you or that could share resources, there's like some sort of credit or way that we can try to encourage or help businesses when they're trying to make that like initial infrastructure investment? Like I look at, restaurants and bars that are in Corcoran that some may be connected to sewer and water and some may not, because the cost to make something like that happen can be significant and they request delays or whatever that might be. But I just don't think it's super clear if there's any way that we support businesses when they're doing something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes. It does make sense. I'm gonna put it under, again, the commercial and industrial
Okay.
discussion notes.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Don't, I'm not trying to discourage you from sharing your feedback. So basically having some kind of credit or
Economic development
economic
policies.
development policy to help, yeah. No, I think that could be a fair point of feedback to bring to the council.
Maybe historically, I think there was one. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't know. I had just heard that. Okay, those were a few things for now on that. I think the question was asked in here, I mean, what would we want to ask residents?
Okay, so that is the next item.
Okay, I am in the wrong
Yeah,
area.
I think
Okay.
there was a typo in the packet, so I think it's completely understandable that you are confused right now. So I think what you're talking about is
6B.
6B.
Okay.
Are you looking at the 6B packet?
Okay, I
Yeah.
will just
And we're
hold,
still on 6A.
I will keep holding.
Okay. I
Sorry,
apologize for
everyone.
that. I completely, no, it is my fault, so it is totally my fault. I apologize for the confusion.
What is the schedule for the next comp plan update? Is that coming up again soon? Is there any priorities we need to have? Let's basically prepare for that. What's the schedule for that?
I think like 2025, 26, or maybe a little later.
System statements will come out in 2025, which
Okay.
is what our parameters are, and our comp plan is due in 2028. It's the 8th
So
that
we're
they're
probably a
due.
little early to,
Yeah, and we're always late getting it done, it seems like, so. But our goal is to, under the statutes, is to have them done in 2028. So I think in 2025, we'll get our system statement, and that's when we'll start having the conversations with the council and the planning commission about scope.
I think last year when we had this discussion about our priorities for 23, staff had some suggestions and recommendations. Do you guys as staff have some suggestions in terms of things that we could look at for our priorities for next year?
I pulled up the staff priority list. The reason why I had a few more examples on the previous years is because I had remembered some things had kind of called out from conversations, and I don't know if it necessarily came up. But I think that's why I talked about, I think I offered accessory structure standards, because I think that was one discussion we had, or one zoning ordinance amendment we had, that we had a slight fix, but do we want to look at something bigger?
Right.
So let's see here, what didn't get done this year from staff's perspective. Landscaping performance standards was one that didn't get tackled this year. And then updating zoning district standards. I think I meant that as more of residential, try to see if we can come up with standards that would make a PUD less attractive. So kind of have our standards actually match a little bit more with what the market is asking for, instead of constantly having people to request flexibility for standards that we're seeing, or from standards that we see requests from flexibility a lot.
Right.
So that was, but we are now tackling the commercial industrial, and so I don't know if it makes sense to do both at the same time. I think the commercial industrial project's going to be pretty big. It's a 7 months best case scenario timeline. So you can certainly put on the list if that's something you want to do. It might be second half if council agrees with that. But then I have a list of like 20 other ones. Let's see. Our let's see here. Update accessory structures also on the list. This wasn't highlighted as a priority list, or one of the top 5 priorities from staff. Discussion of our home occupation ordinance. It's a mess. I hate it. It doesn't make sense. And I think we could, again, recognize that commercial is changing, and I think it's something like more than a third of commercial businesses is happening in people's homes now, and so kind of updating the ordinance to get the times. And I'm pulling that statistic out of thin air. I know it's something significant. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a lot of commercial businesses are moving away from the storefronts and are utilizing like internet infrastructure, and so able to do it from their home.
Well, like you said, considering the sign of the times and what's happened in society, I mean, that seems to be something that would be very logical for us to take a look at, if you're seeing that as an issue that continues to come up in the community.
And do you feel like it's underutilized by like, do you see a whole lot of people applying for home occupation licenses or what?
People are just doing
I
it.
think that's what I would say. And so if it makes sense to tackle it as, to streamline it or clean it up so that we encourage more people. If it doesn't make sense and you feel like it's cumbersome, I guarantee you that people are not going to try to navigate those.
Yes, we could certainly add that. And then this got me thinking, if we're also talking about trying to encourage agriculture, another question that keeps coming up are agri-businesses, such as like a vineyard. We're silent on something like that. Technically, you could interpret our code to say that that may not be allowed, or they'd have to go through an event center IUP, which doesn't quite fit what they're trying to do. So we could also look at that potentially with the community farms, gardens, and agribusinesses, and how we can support that. Yeah, or apple orchards, things like that.
It seems like both the home occupation item as well as the landscaping items, considering it was potentially a priority for last year, and we've already talked about it, that's something that maybe needs to be addressed. Maybe those would be two logical ones to add. And then since we're going through this process with the update of the commercial industrial stuff, and it is going to take a significant part of 24 to do that, I suppose that would be an easy one to put on the list, right? Because we know we're already going to be doing it.
Sure, we can certainly do that. Show council that our priorities align. I think that makes sense. Okay, so I have 4 then. I have landscaping, / preservation of a diversity of environmental habitats, community farms, gardens, agribusinesses, how we can support them, home occupation ordinance, and then the commercial industrial update.
Sounds robust.
Yeah.
We'll be busy.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more comments? I have a few things that I'd like
I have
to
I have a question comment. I looked at what we did like some training on homeowners association this year. Is anybody else interested? Because I don't know the whole Met Council thing very well and why it's important, what value we get from it. Is that something, maybe there's an easy summary of that, is that worth like learning, like what, I don't really understand, I know there must be some, like they take money and then they give the money, so probably that, but like the rules that were under with it,
I've never seen them give money.
the benefits of it, the value, the why, I don't know, is that something, I don't know if anybody else is like curious to learn more about it.
Like if there was an easy meeting and you could do a quick,
Yeah, 20-minute
Training.
session
Oh,
in
yeah,
advance
Met
or
Council,
something.
that's easy.
It might not be a
15 minutes.
but it might be. We could certainly, I try to do an annual training session, so we could certainly add that to the
Okay.
training. It would be a bit more of a deep dive on
It-
that council, sure.
Yeah, I would, yeah, think that'd be
So with that, I look at our list of things that we've accomplished over this past year, and I'm very proud of it. I think it's also very interesting to see these items bulleted out the way that you have them. But we all know how much thought and preparation went into each one of these tasks. I've been on the Planning Commission now for just about 2 years. I've enjoyed this work and working with the council and my colleagues here on the Planning Commission. Most of all, I've enjoyed this because it's given me an opportunity to learn things that I otherwise would never have been exposed to. But I'll say that I would really enjoy and would benefit from another training session, which I think should be open to the public. And this, I would like this training session to break down our city code, the comprehensive plan, state law, and others, so that we on the commission and perhaps hopefully the public can get a sense of how we operate within the system of laws that we have. I think as part of this training, we could go over the standards that we regularly encounter, variances, CUPs. I believe it would be immensely helpful to have a night without any other business to really focus on these items. I think we focus, as we should, on specific things that come up through the course of the year, and I think it would be that this would be a good year to get back to some basics and start looking at the big picture again. Thank you.
Certainly do that. One of the reasons why I think I ended up trying to utilize a meeting that we maybe had a small item is there was an attempt to do a night that wasn't a planning commission night, and I ended up sitting here with Kendra with, I think, one person here because either people forgot or ended up not being a great night. So I'm happy to certainly look at a different night. I think Tuesdays or Mondays could be very doable for me, so that we're not trying to work it into an existing meeting or have a tight turnaround before the meeting, something like that. So you'll just have to let me know what all works for you, and I can let you know when I have a chance to kind of, I think January is going to be a big month, so, and I think we have a tight turnaround between New Year's and our meeting, so I think January wouldn't be great, but we could look at Q1, beginning of Q2, and see what makes sense for our schedule.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more comments or questions for staff? No? Do you have another slide, or are you?
Yeah, I have the next item.
Yeah,
ready.
a
Yeah.
new slide.
A new slide. Mr. Chair, would you like a presentation summarizing the staff report, or do we just want to get into the discussion?
I think for myself, what I would find more helpful than like a presentation, in here you indicated kind of the questions that were posed to the council members. If there's any kind of summary of their response that you could give, because I feel like a part of the challenge I had with this is the vastness and kind of trying to hone into what was being specifically asked of me.
Sure. No, fair enough. And I think that's right now we're in
Exploration?
Yeah, right now we're in the exploration stage.
Okay.
So do we have defined somewhat the scope, but I think part of this is seeing, are we missing something?
Okay.
Should we further, go back. Should we further whittle it down? Where are your priorities in
Okay.
this? So things like that. So yeah, as part of the 2023 goal setting session, this was adopting the work plan. I thought it was to get this all the way adopted. But adopting the work plan was identified as a priority for 2023. So we did that back on November 20th. We have a work plan adopted, and it's about a 7-month timeline. We have the storage moratorium right now that expires in October of next year. So we actually have a little bit longer than 7 months, but I wanted to build in some wiggle room in case there was additional back and forth, or if we wanted more outreach during the process so that we weren't right up against that timeline to begin with. So right now, the scope is quite large. You are absolutely correct, because we're looking at basically all of our commercial and industrial uses to see, do they make sense? Can we simplify? I believe, or are there areas where we might want that use, but we want specific standards tied to that use? I think warehousing was one that came up. Do we want to make sure that it has connection within so many feet to a major roadway, something like that? So definitely a huge scope, because we have these 7 districts where we allow either commercial or industrial uses. Next slide. So the current scope also included consideration of a height-related transition from residential districts. I believe this is in response to Corcoran Farms wanting to see that as a standard, not something that we negotiated as part of a PUD. And then evaluation of architectural standards and window requirements. to break up the massing on buildings, especially, again, warehousing or distribution centers where they can be quite stark if there are no standards. So seeing what we could do there. Our Northeast district already has fairly robust standards, so I'm not concerned necessarily as much about the commercial industrial uses in that district, but they really only apply to the Northeast district. So if we want to see something similar in other areas of the town, then we would need to address it somewhere in the code. But maybe in our commercial rural area, that still doesn't make sense. So trying to find that balance. An evaluation of all uses and add use-specific standards as warranted. So right now that is this. Oh, and I believe the other one that staff kind of tacked on at the last minute was seeing if we can provide flexibility within our code to apply our impervious surface limit on a per plat basis instead of per site, because again, that's an area where we're constantly having people request flexibility, and it does seem like it could make sense. So that was another area that we wanted to evaluate as part of this. So right now we're in that information gathering and engagement stage, and the council just wanted to provide the planning commission an initial opportunity to provide feedback on their own thoughts about what may be going well with our commercial industrial standards. We really have only seen, Red Barn was a recent commercial application we saw in our Northeast district. We had those 2 big industrial PUDs last year, so maybe getting your feedback on some of those things that you either liked or didn't like with how those were processed, as well as, yeah, I think I tried to, go ahead, next slide. Tried basically the scope identified so far. What are your thoughts on it? Is it too big? Are there things missing? That would all be helpful, I think, at this point. Are there other changes to district dimensional standards? So we're talking about the minimum lot depth, the setbacks, things like that. Is that something that we should be looking at? Are there other changes to architectural standards? So I think your feedback with the flexibility for trying to tie to the history of an area, I think we could definitely include that there under that question. And what uses does the Planning Commission want to see changed in the affected districts and how? So I think this goes back to the council wants to see if some changes should be removed. Does it not make sense? Should we specifically call out an allowance for vertical farming to try to encourage urban farming of some sort? Should we not allow storage anymore to be developed, or is it just that we don't want to see them on our major roadways? They need to be kind of off of our main thoroughfares. So those would be some questions I think that they've been asking, and so we already kind of talked about scope, not scope. Next slide. Is there a desire to see where zoning requirements could be made more business friendly? So, and I think Commissioner Lind, you had spoken to this somewhat, and I think what I heard from you is not necessarily the zoning requirements, but looking at economic development policies to go along with this update to make sure that we're supporting our commercial businesses. So or not commercial, but just our businesses in general. So I think that could be some feedback that we could forward. And then are there specific topics the commission is interested in requesting feedback from our business owners and business landowners? And when I say business, we are specifically not looking at the home occupation ordinance with this update. That is handled separately. So we're specifically looking at our commercial and industrial zones, just to clarify on that. Mm-hmm. And then are there examples of developments in other cities that you either like or dislike that you would like us to kind of keep in mind as we move forward? And any other thoughts that you may have. So you don't have to answer all of these questions. These are just meant as a guide for the discussion. But I will be taking down your feedback, and it's intended to be shared with council in February along with the business survey that's going to be sent out at the end of December. And those results will be shared with council in February as well.
Okay. And that survey is going to?
It's going to anyone that owns commercial or industrial mixed-use land, any land that's within the scope of the project, they'll be receiving a survey. So business owners as well as landowners.
So a question for staff or maybe Councilmember Camp. Is the reason for this to be a council priority is that enough things have happened in the last year that's like, hey, it's just time to clean this up? Or has this been building up for a number of years where the same things keep coming up? Or can you help us understand maybe a little bit more behind what led to this becoming a council priority?
The answer is yes. Myself, I want to make this place ours. It's a good place to live now. I want to keep it that way. But we need to do something to make us, and a wise man once said, Mark Landerman, we have ordinances. We don't follow ordinances. Everything can be adjusted with a PUD or a conditional use permit and such. I'd love to see our ordinances clarified enough so that we don't need to have all those variations and such. Everything you just said, we need to figure out. I would like to do more of a collaboration with some of these people that own property, their thoughts and ideas of what goes in instead of our master plan being the Bible, along with your thoughts and ideas of making something nice. St. Teresa's started something. What's going to go by? We have a plan. Is it what the landowners to the south, is it part of their thoughts and plans? They have customers, they have interested businesses, those kind of things. Let's make it nice, let's do something. And we need everybody's input, not just planning commission, not just the council, the mayor. Our staff very much wants things more simplified, I'm sure, but everything seems very, very complicated. So I think a lot of us, all of us are extremely smart, but none of us have a good, clear idea of what things should look like in our future. Lindsay, your conversation about preserving historic things, those kind of things, the church down here in the corner is one. I've always dreamt preserving my barn as an event center someday or a trailhead as the western part of Corcoran develops. Not everybody thinks that way. A lot of people think, here's my land, I'm clearing it, I'm going to make it ready because our standards are such that I got to plant these shrubs, these trees, these things when I'm all done. Doesn't matter what's there. Your conversation previously related to preserving open space, those kind of things. I would love to be able to do that too, but I'm going to call myself crazy because the cost of land and the value of land is so astronomical. Almost everything has to be developed. You know, the community gardens, those kind of things, that's all great, but we don't hear that from our Bellwether residents. We don't hear that from our Ravinia residents. The Trevera residents are coming in. Everybody is part of a homeowners association. Many people don't even mow their own yards, and that frustrates me, if that makes sense. Might not be the answer you're looking for, but we need to get focused. We need to clean things up. I think the council is all the same feelings on that. Nobody has one big master plan other than we as the city has one, a comp plan. But I think all of the sketches, all of the ghost plats, everything out there need to be updated. What is really going to work? Our environment, everything has changed in this world over the past 2 or 3 years on things. The conversation related to in-house businesses, commercial businesses in-house and stuff. How neat would it be to put up buildings or storefronts that people could move out of their homes and start a business in some of these places? I don't know anybody that wants to do that or can afford the cost of some of these things. Restaurants, I hear it from everybody in the area, we need more restaurants. We don't even have one restaurant. Anybody can think of one restaurant. Sit down, walk in, sit down and eat. We ain't got one.
Mama G's.
Mama G's is, yeah, that's as close to one as we got.
That's close.
25 years ago, when it was Mama G's and it was a restaurant attached to that thing, it was great. And it still is a great thing. But how can we help Mama G's become what they were. Keep it a sports bar, add a restaurant to it, do those things. Not sure they can do it on that corner, you know what I mean? But a lot of very, how can I say it, selfish people, which is okay, but I think everybody, if you just share your ideas and stuff, I think we can come up with a plan going forward. It's gonna take a whole lot of special sessions between the council, the planning commission, those kind of things. I've sat through these meetings and have heard you guys say the council doesn't listen to what we say anyhow, why are we giving them input? We need the input, we want that to make this place good, great. I'm not sure better, just, we need to make something. There's conversations, some people want to just leave it the way it is. We've done enough development, we've done enough, let's keep it agricultural. There's farmers out there that don't want to keep it agricultural because they have nobody coming behind them and they have an opportunity to sell for a extremely high, I think it was said earlier, a 401k program. It is their 401k. So it's a lot to do. I don't want to curb and dictate people what they can and cannot do with their land and those kind of things. But we got to do something. Just saying. That's a long-winded answer, but there's no good answer other than, yep, everything you guys have been saying, we got to do something. And if we can get it all in one package and a clear, concise map going forward for the next 30 years, there's not a city in this country that's ever been able to do it like that. We're going to do a lot of growing here the next bunch of years, or we're going to do nothing because we aren't easy to work with. We can't give direction to some of these developers and those kind of things. We aren't clear on what we want or if we want it or those kind of things. We're not being fair to those people. We aren't being fair to ourselves, landowners. I can talk for hours. I don't want to. Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
If
Thank you,
I could
Counselor.
piggyback off that for just a second, Commissioner Horn. One of the things that I bring as a different perspective, having not spent a lot of time here in Corcoran, but why would I come here for a job? And one of the things that attracts me and attracts a lot of you who moved here are the rural character. And so if you don't preserve and protect that, it's going to be sacrificed for the dollar.
Yep.
And so how do you, I imagine if we just throw that phrase up there, rural character, the five of you have different ideas on how you define what that means. And so the conversations are really important about, okay, for each of you, what is the critical thing for each person that lives in this community and what's going to attract others that want to be in this community? What is the thing that's going to be distinctly Corcoran? So that as compromise has to happen,
Yes.
what are the things that you just aren't going to be willing to compromise on? And so that's why when you do the work, the staff does the work to clarify what they hear, to communicate to those who are coming here. This is what it means to be distinctly Corcoran. And so if you're going to come here, this is our playbook, and we hope you come here to play with us to create a space that's unique. Because if you don't protect it, and I've only been a part of 2 developing communities here in Minnesota since I retired, but they sure look a lot alike. And so, and that's because developers are doing the same thing in communities all across the metro. It's a cookie cutter approach. And the folks that own the land are trying to get a payday, you know, because this has been their family's legacy and it can't be anymore. So it makes sense that they do that. But how do you help them as they're getting what they need out of it to transform the space so that it doesn't compromise what brought everybody to the community in the first place? And will draw more people in. So like when you throw out crazy ideas like an agri-hood, there are some people that are living in one of these cookie cutter communities that are hoping to be able to have an opportunity to have something like that, but it doesn't exist yet.
Thank you. Would you indulge me? I have 5 points that I'd like to cover, and you know, if someone else has a desire to start the discussion, I'm fine with that, but I would like to make some comments. Is that okay? You mind?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. First, Natalie, thank you for preparing this. I'd like to make Corcoran's industrial and commercial zoning better, and I'd like to attract quality businesses here. In this respect, I have 5 points, or 5 thoughts, I guess, I'd like to make. First, I think that our future discussion should include where these zones are situated, and really, I think that to the extent feasible, there should be a cohesiveness that I think is lacking right now. Our downtown area is part field, part electrical substation, part church, part businesses. I think it would be a good idea to have this as part of the overall discussion and take a look at the comp plan to see where these zones are and will be located, because I think it's best to have them somewhat clustered so that there's a more natural movement from less intensive use to more intensive use. What I mean by that is this past week I went and I visited family in Stillwater. And I walk over here, I'm at the grocery store. I go across the street, I'm at Lowe's. I cross the street again, I can bring my kids to Dairy Queen. Everything is right there. To me, that type of planning just flowed. Instead of, kind of like our code, I have to look at page 17 that references page 711 that references page 403. There's a little more cohesiveness. For uses, staff, I'd ask, is it possible to prepare a document that lists the permitted and conditional uses and accessory uses in each zone? My thought is that if we have that information from the code consolidated, it may make for a more meaningful discussion where we can quickly see if something doesn't line up between the zones, or if there is a conditional use that really should be a permitted use. My third point, I think it would be great to bring clarity by removing extraneous language. The staff report alludes to this with the question about why grocery stores are listed in only one zone and not in others. For example, in our code, under the section related to general mixed use, a permitted use is, quote, bakery/retail. Why the slash? Why not just put retail? As another example, there's a permitted use in light industrial for contractors' operations. I don't even know what that means. I think that we should consider whether to keep the list of uses general or specific. Looking at it, I think that some categories could be trimmed by consolidating them into bigger buckets, just like retail shops, restaurants. Related to that, I think we can also make our code easier to decode for businesses. It should be the case that if a business owner wants to come to Corcoran, they should be able to easily find the zone they think they will develop in and see what is allowed. 4, I am also very interested in hearing from hearing what business owners have to say. I think staff should find the right people to ask, though. For example, to the extent that there are lessees, I would talk to them and to the landowners. And finally, as for looking at other cities, does anyone have any other ideas? Again, I mentioned Stillwater. If you've never been there, I think it's great how all of the commercial businesses are easy to find, somewhat close to one another. It's a little bit bigger than Corcoran, but not by much, but that's just my thought. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll kind of pile on that a little bit.
Pile on.
Like, I think of like the communities around here at least. I mean, none of them, I can't think of anybody that's very rural though, like where maybe things would just be a little bit bigger. I'm just imagining lots of open space, but I think sort of somewhat some parts of Arbor Lakes, I kind of like, I like some of that where they have we don't have any kind of community center here or anything like that to kind of, or really anything to really rally around apart from Corcoran Lions Park, I guess. You know, I don't know. There's not much here, I think, from my perspective as Corcoran, which I think it's got to be a big goal. Is like, what is Corcoran? Because right now there's really nothing here as far as I'm concerned. I go to Rogers or Maple Grove. That's where I go hang out. But I think of something like the Arbor Lakes. I was thinking about how they did their community center area with the skating and I don't know if anybody's been over there, but they made this really kind of neat little skating kind of area around the community center. Lots of gardens and stuff. Like, to me, that's really interesting. It's kind of a interesting draw. People want to come there and be a part of that in the summer. It's not just a skating rink. It's more interesting. It's and then the shops there kind of like that. I mean, that's a really big area, Arbor Lakes, but the idea that there's a lot of variety between, and I don't know how we get that so we don't end up with just a whole bunch of, you know, kennels or something else, you know, here, like, oh, those are great, we'll just throw more kennels up because there's land. But where we can, I don't know if there's a way to control the flow, I guess, to make sure we get some restaurants, some, could be breweries or something. It could be then some retail shops, and it could be just the variety, I guess, because I would want some hair, like style, salons and things like that, but they're all sort of connected, but they're the services that you might want to come to and be a part of. That's the stuff I think about, like to get you excited. I mean, people get excited about going out to eat and having a few drinks, and it's not the stanchion. I don't think people get excited to go to Mama G's for dinner. My wife likes her fried fish, but that's the kind of thing I was thinking about, like if there's a way to control the flow of that, and if there's anything we can do to make something from a community perspective, and maybe the town, whatever this, I mean, I know it's centering around a nursing facility basically, but if that ends up becoming something that's in the vision and not just I just have a feeling it's not going to turn into what we're imagining. I don't know. I know that's part of what this is about. I think of like Delano, and I've been to that community quite a bit, and that's, again, it's been a town, and Corcoran's never really been much of a town. I mean, it was just something you drove through, but they have like this area you do go walking, and there's little shops, and they have it's a community, like it's an actual community. They do have a community center, and people get a good deal to be a part of that community center, and they have fitness and things like that there. And I don't know what that would take to have something like that. I was thinking about that, like, is that, I also think it'd be amazing to have a charter, because we'll never have a school here because there's too many school districts, but could we encourage a charter school to build here? I don't know what that would look like, because to me that would be really neat, because then maybe a lot of Corcoran families would actually be a part of something that is more Corcoran. Does that make sense what I'm thinking about, like a school? Because we can't have a school realistically. I mean, we could have a whole bunch of elementary schools, I suppose, but yeah. Oh, I wrote this down. I think about, I don't know if this is still a thing, but I know Rogers has it, the municipal liquor store. Is that something that's ever been discussed? Does that make sense for Corcoran to, as a city? I grew up with those in Detroit Lakes, and I know Rogers has that, but from is that a tax revenue sort of thing that anybody want to do? I think it's ridiculous, but then I think about it from a city's perspective, it might be beneficial.
Yeah, Richfield uses their liquor store revenue to pay for their Parks and Rec programs.
Yeah.
So, or at least a part of their revenue from it.
I mean, we don't have one right now.
No.
So, I mean, there is no liquor store here. So is that something we maybe want to think about as a city to say, maybe we think about that. I don't know.
Just real quick on that. We
Yeah.
got it.
We did?
Yeah.
Used to be the old Napa building, or the new Napa building now was our liquor store, not municipal, it was privately owned.
That's right, that's right.
The biggest reason it went away, it couldn't compete with Hy-Vee has.
Yep.
The liquor store now, Cub, I mean, I would love to have
That's right, we did have.
a small town, Stillwater. You look at Stillwater like Brian, or that Mark talked about, you've got the old Main Street, and then up on the hill, you've got everything organized, everything nice. Two unique spots. In our side, when you look at our comp plan, we have kind of a unique area up from Mama G's all the way to Hope Church. If you look at our comp plan, that's kind of one area, and another area that's mixed use and stuff is right down here by this intersection. Our biggest problem is the county roads are set. We don't have a lot of say in, we're controlled on where access is, those kind of things. You also brought up the fact that schools, Oxford School District had the land over by our park. That is now ours. They didn't want it anymore. You had, I think Buffalo owns a small parcel right on the northwestern corner of Corcoran. If not, it's the southeastern corner of Hanover. They've got a large piece of land there for future growth. I don't know. School districts don't share it. So that is a huge element on what is Corcoran. Corcoran's a rural community. Who wants to come here? Whoever made the comment about the economic development and stuff, I'd love to see small startup medical companies come into some of these areas, those kind of things. And then those are all things that support this downtown we're talking. We've got St. Therese is going to start something. Something's going to happen to the south all the way to 10. And now those landowners and stuff need to share with us what they want to do, what their thoughts are. Even though we've got a design or a ghost plat of what that downtown looks like and stuff, it still has to change to fit the people that want to come here. And I always get, I don't know how many times I get Ravinia folks, Bellwether folks, Amberley, some of these developments, I don't want a downtown. If I need something, I go to Maple Grove to get it. I go to Rogers to get it. I go down to Hamel, Plymouth to go to Target to get it. I didn't move out here to see more development happen, but you moved out here into a development that wasn't there to begin with. So that's...
Well, we don't have a lot of choice in the end, right? I mean, in the end, the stuff's gonna develop. It's just, it's kind of what you were saying, I think, Jay, is it's like, we gotta make sure we are guiding that. It's gonna happen because it's for the next community.
Well, I would like to make a distinction piggybacking on what you said, and that is that Maple Grove intentionally designed that area because they wanted to be a city that everyone came to shop in those. I don't desire personally that Corcoran designs its commercial and industrial with that in mind. How can we attract people from all over the metro to come and skate in our ice skating rink? What I would love to see is that we build a business community that serves our residents. Now that's just, I'm laying it out there. I know but if you're asking for what we think, that's what I would rather see. Because that's what it strikes a balance between those who don't need to come here to see the massive commercial areas that you can go to quite easily, right? But it also does give us things like hair salons and coffee shops and some, restaurants or bistros right in your neighborhood that you can go to. But I think that there is, when you're building economic plans or incentives to draw businesses, there's a distinction when you mark what your priority is. We want to be a city that everybody comes to visit versus we just want to be a city that serves our residents well. And so that's a distinction I guess I would like to see happen.
If I could piggyback off that for just a second. So I just came from a city that had a lot of drivers. So you had Valley Fair, you had Canterbury, you had Mystic, and you had the Renaissance Festival. And people came. So here's something that comes with it. I just want to 75% of the crime that occurred in the community of Shakopee was from people that do not live in Shakopee.
Yeah.
And so taxpayers' expenses related to that crime, just some of the realities as you do that, we were trying to figure out, so through a ticket tax and other things, how do we transfer the cost to those who are not residents of the community that are raising the costs of operations, particularly for our police department. So that's one unintended consequence of having cool things that everybody wants to come check out. Another thing that I wanted to point out is I love Stillwater, and when you go just down the river from there, Hastings is also trying to reimagine themselves, and they've spent a lot of money. Yeah, I have some friends that have served on the council there, trying to invite people in. They're not going to be Stillwater, because Stillwater has some of those really cool historical buildings, and it's become a destination spot. So tourism is a prime driver for those businesses that are in that beautiful area right along the river. And then, like Dean was saying, the folks that live there really get their services in the area that you were talking about on the top of the hill. And so trying to figure out what sort of businesses do you want? Who are they there to serve? That's an important clarification as you think about, as Corcoran grows out, who do they want to be? Because you're either going to draw people that want to come and use your resources and leave, or you're going to draw people that want to come and invest in the community.
Yep.
Those are two different things. And you see that, I think that Arbor Lakes is a great example. I spent time as they were developing that, talking with them. I love the ribbon, but what an expensive thing to operate.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Just real quick too, guys, I was in Maple Grove in '87. There was nothing on this side of the interstate. Weaver Lake Road was a gravel road all the way out. The downtown Cub Food was just getting built in '87, the start of everything down there. The landowner, the Barton Sand and Gravel, the McCrossan, all of those things, while I was part of the city government over Maple Grove, their biggest thing was, we want to remove the minerals out of the gravel pits. Once that's done, we want to build a really nice place. That's how all of that happened. In '87, Maple Grove's population was 34,000 people. They didn't have any of those things. No restaurants, no theaters, no main streets, nothing. 34,000, we're at 7,500 right now. We got to do it right. Again, they had school districts and those kind of things and a lot of ability to do this stuff. We don't have a lot of that available to us right now. And we need to collaborate with landowners and stuff, kind of like they did in Maple Grove. So it was crazy. I lived there for 20 years, watched it come from the interstate all the way west to where I live, and I got out and said I never wanted to do this again. I wasn't the smartest, sharpest knife in the drawer. I moved 5.5 miles away to the other side of Corcoran, and it is just kind of just kept coming and didn't stop. So your thoughts, ideas, dreams, if we don't share them, we aren't going to be able to come up with some good direction from all these people. So.
Mr. Chair, I think if Natalie comes back next time, it might be helpful to talk about market realities.
Sure.
Because we are not Maple Grove at the intersection of 694 and 494. We are not Stillwater with the historic downtown. We're not even Hastings and Delano with the historic downtown. So thinking about what drives commercial, what's important to industrial might be helpful also as we frame the land use. Is it in the right spot? What are those users looking for? I think could be part of that. Because I think whether we love Arbor Lakes or don't, Arbor Lakes will never be here. It just won't. We just don't have the traffic volumes. But there are some things that we can take from Arbor Lakes and bring in. And I think that's where Natalie can bring some of that market stuff to the next update.
This was a little bit of an apple and orange discussion because you do have the Stillwaters and the Anokas and even the Shakopees where they had the historic downtown, and the position they're in is way different than the communities that don't. And those communities that have tried to create that downtown, arguably across the metro area, it doesn't always go all that well. So I think that's really a fair question for Corcoran. Do we truly want to have a downtown? Is that in the cards? Is that in the best interest of the community? Or do we just, the market driven, what is the market going to support in Corcoran? And maybe we don't try to create a downtown that's never going to feel like a downtown because it was created.
Yeah, kind of more like that, what was it called, the neighborhood commercial, or what was that one? I don't think I remember reading about that one before, but
You guys, great conversation. Great idea.
community commercial, is that the smaller one?
Neighborhood smaller.
Neighborhood commercial. Yeah, that maybe is kind of, Corinne, what you're thinking, you're we talking about, like, in my mind, where it's instead of worrying about trying to create a community, because I don't know if we'd ever have that here. We don't have a school, like, to rally around. We don't, do we kind of focus more on things like that? And what would that look like? I mean, I don't know if our comp plan is designed for something like this, or sort of like a commercial area surrounded by a residential area. I don't know if that's what this would normally be versus the big commercial or industrial areas. I mean, I love the Northeast District design and things like that, but I don't know if that was kind of an interesting thing, because these are smaller, like smaller,
Focused
like,
neighborhood areas instead.
yeah, right.
Grandiose Main Street.
To more support your neighborhood, the area you live in, versus maybe being more of a, I don't know, I wasn't expecting to be a destination thing, but just something that Corcoran residents wouldn't be able to enjoy, I guess.
And then we get comments, if I may, Chair Landerman, we get comments, we want a coffee shop, we want gas stations, we want this stuff, but don't put it there.
Yeah.
That's not in my backyard attitude. Where would you want to put it? Well, put it over there.
Yeah.
Nobody has a good idea of layouts.
That's true, because if I'm in the house and then I'm next to where the commercial, the shops would be, I don't like that, but.
But it's kind of like what Mark said, it'd be nice if we had that retail and such, and then a transition to a neighborhood, if that makes sense. And that's what most communities are set up with, is the residential, maybe border it with apartments, those kind of things, and then in a townhomes, and then as a residential. Is that the way to do it? I don't know. I haven't seen anything different. It's like somebody said, everything's cookie cutter, everything's the same, no matter what city you go to, they're all that same layout. I wish somebody would come with something new. But, cool.
Mr. Chair, if I could, just to kind of help with the scope. So as we know, it's already kind of a big scope that we're dealing with tonight. The council was asked specifically if they wanted to reevaluate where the zoning districts were located. And part of that discussion, what's difficult is going back to market realities. We only have so many areas where the location will support a commercial user. And there was a market study done about a decade ago or so that basically said County Road 30 because of the infrastructure coming in there. So that's why we have that mixed use and then a commercial industrial corridor along County Road 101. And then that's also, we already have the existing business park down here. So the downtown plan is to try to kind of play off that, and while also having a mix of residential uses, and to change that's going to could potentially change some of our density numbers for residential if we were to completely change that to all commercial instead of having kind of a mixed use component. And I think it kind of goes into hand what you're saying. Mixed use kind of allows for some of those residential uses to be closer to the commercial, and it's supposed to be complementary at the same time, while also having a transition to for the lower density residential to the south and north. So, and then the other areas we have is we have a small segment of 55, so that's where we have our commercial industrial down there, because that's another node that those uses can be supported. And then we have our commercial businesses off the County Road 18, a little further north. So I think those areas, it'd be very difficult, I think, at this stage to look at different areas. Those are the areas that they're supported. So there's a reason why those have been carved out. And I don't know if that was something, the council really was not interested in tackling the land use map as much as trying to figure out the standards to help guide when the development comes in.
I would propose, I don't know how we, this is feedback for maybe council or for the agenda for 2024. The density requirements and wanting to be an agricultural community, there is a constant, at least I feel, this constant tension between the two priorities. And making these types of decisions, we need to either revisit our vision as a city and our, grounding characteristics that would then flow into, I agree, a charter around our commercial areas and what we want. We need to kind of be guided by a charter of, is it serving our residents, or is it serving, what are we trying to be? Maybe that's revisiting our current vision, or maybe it's updating, or maybe it's creating our own charter around how we're going to guide these commercial businesses. Because we really should be looking at, if we're gonna grow by 20%, what would we need in our community? Do we need a butcher shop? Well, we can't have one. I knew you were gonna
That's
bring
on
that
my
up.
list of things to bring up when it's my
Okay, so
turn.
if our goal is to serve our residents, we should prioritize a restaurant, we should prioritize a butcher shop, maybe. We should prioritize, a couple different essential services. And, but we would need to make that decision of that's what our goal is. And how do we do that? Do we have a visionary setting like the council does? Should they have that session, or does that make sense? Before we go into the specifics of like requirements of architectural design standards, should we start there?
So I think that's part of the conversation that with market realities, I think would be helpful for the planning commission. So the reality is we don't have an active EDA trying to seek out certain types of uses or have much more of a program that, not to say that we couldn't put something in, but it's a little outside of the zoning scope of things. But we don't have a strategy right now to track businesses. And so trying to say, okay, well, we want a restaurant here is very difficult when we don't own the land. So the zoning district, what you do is you set up the uses that you would be okay with.
Sure.
For that land, for land zoned a certain way. And so we have restaurants in most, obviously not our industrial business park, but I think there's a restaurant in most of our commercial districts. And in the mixed use, those are allowed or permitted use, or maybe a CUP. And and then part of, I think, right now our adopted vision is the comp plan. So that is our charter that we're supposed to go by. I know that there's some disagreement as to whether or not that reflects our current leadership. But a comp plan update at this time is going to be very expensive when we're just about to do it in a few years. So I think it's trying to work with the parameters that we have. So when the next commercial development comes in, we're okay with the standards that are on the book. And I think that part of what we're trying to control is the architecture, because we can't control the use, but we can control what it looks like. Does that make sense?
Yep.
We can't drive development. Staff can't, council can't, planning commission can't. Private investment's going to drive development, right?
Right.
I mean, we can't say we want this there, we want this there, because we don't own the property and we don't have the money to do that. Somebody's going to have to come in and want to do that and be convinced they can make money by doing that.
Exactly, and they need rooftops to support it, so that's part of the reason why we have, I think part of the reason why some of these developments started popping up from previous council directions, because we didn't have the rooftops to support commercial uses, so we needed more density to get the commercial uses. And so I think a lot of these long-term plans, we're just on the cusp of things, because we're finally at a place where we can start seeing some of these uses be supported. And there's some argument that we're still not quite there yet, but I do think that the interest is picking up, so.
May I discuss a few things? Okay. One is when the question was, is there anything that's missed? And I know I am, bring this up, but when the butcher shop closed, it was brought up that there is nowhere under our city code where that is an allowable business. And so I am, again, not trying to pick a specific area, but I would like to address that, because we are still agricultural. And so we do have folks who use butcher shops. So that is, if there's something missed, if there's a place that we could figure out where that makes sense. And I know that you indicated that there were some potential issues, maybe even with water, and so just understanding that a little bit more.
Sure.
One of the things specifically, in addition to the height transition, which I think is an interesting concept to talk about how we move from residential, is to also talk about lighting in association with that. A lot of feedback from folks is not so much that they mind the business per se, but all of a sudden now there's like a constant amount of light. And so I believe that I saw lighting standards pop up, or a lighting ordinance has been floating around. And so maybe that's something that, no?
Well, it's a street lighting policy, so it's about when we accept it. And
Oh,
things
okay.
like that. So the lighting standards that we have right now are based off of feedback from public safety.
And
so
I
think
figured-
that's going to be a constant
Yep.
struggle to balance the dark sky with public safety
Yep.
requirements. But we could certainly say that that's something we'd like to look at, but it's not even necessarily me that you're
Oh,
gonna
I
have
know,
to do
I
it.
know, I know it's gonna be Matt, trust me. Maybe if it's even something where like we turn off internal lights at when business is closed, you know, like, I don't know. Anyway, throwing that out there. That was just a thought I had. And then something that you mentioned in your report was the fact that like when things are a conditional use, but maybe could be just a permitted use, that's actually more appealing for somebody because it's a less expensive route to pursue, right? So I'm all for that. When I was looking through the permitted uses and then the things, I mean, it seems like you can't really operate a daycare as, except for in the rural commercial as a permitted use. It was like anyway, that was just an example I'm throwing out there. Maybe it was a kennel. I mean, there were a couple other ones.
It was, yeah, that is true of the commercial kennel. And that was specific as a response to something. So it was a way basically, I think, they didn't want any more commercial kennels out of homes. And so,
Sure.
So then there was a clause added to our
Right.
animals chapter
For
that
sure.
says it has to be approved through a CUP
Yep.
where allowed, and
Yep.
it's a CUP in commercial districts.
And
Now,
I
could
know
we look
that-
at changing that
Yeah.
process while still not having them in residential areas, definitely.
Okay, and it generally, I mean, I believe that a lot of this grows from something, right? Like, and that's a little bit why I'm hesitant, because I don't know what I don't know until I don't know it, you know? And so I'm concerned personally with the vast scope, because I want to be a value add over the next 7 months. I don't want to be a drain, right? So anyway, so I would definitely be all for that. And like Chair Lanterman said, if then in doing that, we recognize that there are larger buckets that we can categorize and organize things by, I would absolutely think that that is, makes a lot of sense. And then the buffering, it was asked whether or not we felt like the buffering ordinance that was just created would be enough to address kind of the transition from residential to commercial. And I guess I want to just clarify, this is specifically going from residential to these industrial, light industrial, like commercial. It's not, because there was a time when light industrial bumped up to commercial, and even, I know this came up with the garage storage that on 55, where he was talking about why would we require such landscape when he's backing up to the solar power park. And I understand that that's a different situation because he was trying to develop ahead of the use in that area. But I just want to make sure that that's something where we aren't trying to create this unique or over-the-top buffering between places where our commercial is connecting to each other, because it seems to me that the intent would be to just provide buffering between residential neighborhoods. I feel like if we get a handle on the height transition, I don't know that that anything outside of our current buffering ordinance, as long as it's allowed to be applied in this area, would be necessary, personally. And then I feel like I had one other thing. Oh, that's what it was. Okay. The other question was in regards to the mini storage. I feel like we have a lot of storage, just as a person who's a resident. And I know a lot of it is off of those 55. There's, I believe, a few. And so I'm wondering this question. We just did this with recreational cannabis, where we said that we were only going to permit certain licensing because that's a licensed use. But can we apply a similar thinking, not in regards to like having to apply for a license, but can we apply a same numerical value to types of businesses in the city as they come up? For example, we have 4 storage units already. As a city, we feel like that has kind of, I mean, you say you're shaking your head, so jump in. I'm not saying like a licensing, because it's not a licensing, but is it the type of thing where if the moratorium is removed, we only have standards to guide the number that pop up in the city? And that is really the only other alternative, as opposed to just creating standards that then would drive the development, but we wouldn't be able to say we've got 8, we're good.
Yeah,
Okay.
there isn't like a quota.
Sure.
I don't believe, I haven't seen something like that, so I'd have to look at the legality behind it. If you're shaking your head no,
Leave it to me to throw it out there.
I'm gonna take her word for
Sure.
it, for now at least. But I would say if the direction is, we don't want any more mini storage. We have enough, we want to reserve the land we have left for other uses that, for whatever reason, it drives more jobs. I think it's like the number
Yep.
one reason why I see cities do
Yep.
this. We can remove that as a use. Or we could add standards to try to minimize it a bit more. We don't want it on Highway 55. We don't want it on our county roads. It has to be something that's a little more tucked away. A, for visibility, B, to try to minimize where they can go in. So you can try to do like a standard that way. And I think Brooklyn Park has done that. So, the other thing that we can do is we might say no more mini storage, but we're okay with indoor storage because they take up less land, because they can go up a little bit more instead of having people drive up to a unit. So there's a couple ways we could go about it, and I do think that you're not the only person that has this feeling that we have too much mini storage. But yeah, the quota, I would be,
Okay.
I think it would almost be easier, I think it would be easier to just say
remove
no
it.
more if we're saying no more.
And is there a scenario where doing that, removing a use altogether, then ends up, you know, biting you?
So I'll tell you, so mini storage is good for tax base, generally speaking. I haven't yet looked into, council wants to understand if they drive crime, and I haven't looked into the data that might be available for that at this point, but they are good for tax base. They are not great for job creation.
Right.
And so you have to decide what it is that you want as a city.
And in regards to the crime, can a standard be the requirement of like you know, some kind of camera on site, surveillance in that regard? Or is that like, oh my gosh, we would never require that standard? I mean, because I could see that that's kind of like Big Brother,
How,
you know?
well, and how would we enforce that long term?
Sure.
So yeah,
Okay.
I think if they as a business want to put up with surveillance, by all means, please do. And I think most of them have some type of surveillance. How extensive it is, I think, is a different topic.
Sure.
But I think trying to standardize business operations is different
Sure.
than standardizing
Yep.
the development process.
Even though at a council meeting, there was an attempt to standardize business operations, which was a big red flag for me. So thank you for just showing me that. I myself was just about to do it, so I appreciate that.
Does that a type of ambiguous, I say that lightly, like discretion of, oh, we have enough storage now? Like, does that put us at any legal risk?
Other cities have said no more mini storage. You can say use to.
But any type of business?
No,
Say-
well, so it has to, so basically where we get in trouble is if we say, this person can go here, but this person can't, and they wanted to do the same, that kind of thing. So you want to look at the application, not the individual, not the applicant.
Sure.
Where we can get in trouble is if we either intentionally or unintentionally go after a protected class of people. That would be where we run into problems. Sometimes the state preempts city zoning, so group homes have to be allowed in residential districts in some capacity. We can't say that they're not allowed, but storage units are not a protected use, protected class.
Got it.
We are able to say that we don't want them in the city anymore. And then all of our current storage would become legal non-conforming uses.
The last comment I make to separate topic is, you know, what in our policies, ordinances, or codes are we encouraging commercial businesses, existing or new, to adopt sustainable business practices and operations, or encouraging or empowering them to do so?
So our Northeast District, I feel like takes a step in that direction, but again, it's specific. It was kind of a part of my vision for it was to use it as what could work for a larger application. So we have those resiliency strategies that is supposed to encourage use of landscaping that takes less water. They're required to have what is the word? Well, they're not required to have the salt plan.
Oh, the chlorine management.
Yeah, they're required to have a chlorine management plan to start addressing the use of salt in large private parking lots. But yeah, so we're trying to kind of test out some of these strategies as part of a zoning practice in the Northeast District. So far, everyone has been able to fit in the 3 resiliency strategies. That is really, I thought that might be a sticking point, and so far everyone's been able to incorporate that. So I think that we could look at something on a broader scale now that we have a little bit more success seeing that it is doable and it doesn't necessarily break their bottom line to have to incorporate those.
I appreciate and like that. I think I was maybe looking at it a little differently in that, what could we maybe do to empower or encourage it? rather than a requirement, but more of like, okay, well, if you are a green certified building, you get this, or, you know, whatever it might be that we give credit back or something to that, to encourage them to maybe seek going above and beyond. Maybe then we can be like this representative community that strives for ideals.
Yeah. And I think as a PUD, that I think is one of, technically something that could go in one of our categories. It's harder to encourage it without putting some kind of standard in our, like, standardized zoning. So that's why the Northeast District, I think, has worked well, because we provide 8 different ways for them to incorporate sustainable practices in their businesses and their design, and then they choose 3. And so it is a little bit more of a, it's kind of, it's still a requirement, but there is some choice in it and how they meet those standards. So but we should certainly look at that. Like, how can we encourage that? So.
The final thing I had was we were talking specifically about the transition in height standards. And I know most of it with the intent is from residential to industrial, but I think that along, or residential to commercial, whatever those business areas are. But I think within that, even if any of you have been to Anoka Equine off of, probably not, but off of 101, they were this, it's a veterinarian, right? Beautiful, quaint little building, and then what was built next door was a massive concrete warehouse. And so I do think that that transition in height also applies within the zone, like the commercial or the industrial, the business zone itself. I guess if we're going to have, like, the Corcoran Farms is a larger area, it would be nice to see, I guess what I would see is that as at a center, which makes it hard if it's supposed to be connected to a roadway, I understand. But in terms of if you're going from residential, you've got the scale of those smaller, then go up, and then they go up, right? So that you kind of have that pivotal point, because those businesses can also dwarf other businesses in the area.
So at 100 feet, it's a 35-foot height limit. At 175 feet, it's 38, something along those lines.
Right.
I'd have to look at the practicality of it, but
Well, I know, right? We're just throwing out the
yeah,
things.
no, that's exactly it. So I appreciate it.
Okay, good discussions. Any additional comments? No? Okay. Natalie, is there anything in the planning project update that you would like to discuss with us?
So January is either going to be a very easy meeting or it's going to be a very long meeting.
Easy.
We don't get much choice.
Can I get a motion for easy? Do I have a second?
So we for sure have a small preliminary plat that really is just a lot line adjustment, but because they don't have the required frontage, they need to request a variance, which means they have to go through a formal platting process. So that one should be fairly straightforward for the Planning Commission. What is the huge question mark right now is Hope Community Church has submitted their development application for the long-anticipated mixed-use development. They are really eager to be placed on a January agenda. It's possible it could be February. I will know more in about a week. We have a meeting with them to see if we can get things ready for January. So prepare for that. Unfortunately, it's right around New Year's, and I hate to do that to you. I'm going to try my best to get the packet done before I go on a week-long vacation for the end of December. So we will try to get the packet to you as soon as possible, knowing that.
I assume that one will be, I assume there'll be a lot of community people.
Yeah, that's gonna be big.
I saw the sign posted already, which I was surprised at, or is it just up for?
Oh, Dwight just wanted to get ahead of the game
Get it up,
and get
okay.
that notice out so people are
Okay.
aware. The public hearing notices have not been sent out. They wouldn't be sent. So we have a meeting on Wednesday to kind of firm things up. If it does go to January, the public hearing notices with the actual meeting date would be mailed, for January, would be mailed at the end of next week.
Okay.
And I can definitely send you all an email as well to let you know what to prepare for.
Okay.
And
if I can real quick too on that, not getting anybody's hopes up, but that group has done an awful lot to spend time with neighbors to help them understand what they're looking for, so it could go either way that way.
Okay.
That's good to know. I hope that they follow our code.
Or there's a PUD.
Okay.
Well, it has mark-
Like I
So
said,
they will not be following.
I stand by my
Right now.
comment.
It's a PUD. So,
Okay, and, you know, I appreciate you getting packets to us early. I do want to comment that I received my packet for this meeting at 12:30 a.m. on Saturday.
I apologize. That definitely wasn't, planning staff was done well before that, so I don't know, it must have been an issue of police
It's
capacity.
okay, not a big deal. I'm a quick study,
Okay.
or so I think. Okay, so let's see. City council report. Councilman Varenkamp, I know that you covered a lot. Do you have
I've talked
anything
a lot.
else you want to add?
We got this done. This is the start of
Yay.
the next chapter, if I can say it that way. I think the previous two chapters were great and wonderful. This one, the jury's still out. There's so many things that are gonna happen. There's so many things that's gotta get done. Jay is drinking from a fire hose right now. I'm quite certain he can handle it. But again, with all your guys' brainstorming this evening, with everything that he has in his past, all of the council members, the mayor, we're all a little crazy, but he's our CEO now. He's gonna give us advice and stuff like that and bounce it off us. We'll keep playing the way we've been playing as far as our ideas and thoughts, your ideas and thoughts, and come up with something that's nice. Specifically, any questions on anything in the report that's in front of you here? Some of you guys have had thoughts and stuff.
Did something change with the Met Council density?
That is a huge question, and you guys want to know and understand densities, council, Met Council, those kind of things. I always tell people the story, Met Council used to tell communities where sewer and water was. That has changed an awful lot. Kendra can maybe add to the densities, those kind of things. I know in the council, Councilmember Bottom, those kind of things, they wanted at one point to change
Is that okay or
low density to 5.
Oh,
I mean, go up instead of 3 to 5. We want to change it to, I mean, my mind, let's go 2.5 per acre. Well,
no? Yeah.
there's some things we can't do because that's council dictates to us. And Kendra can maybe answer those questions. But otherwise, you guys have seen it. This has been a huge, I always say it, great job you guys on speaking your piece, telling us what's on your mind, what you're thinking. I've got the same things going on in my head. How do we keep this place a neat place to live?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. If you got any questions, call any one of us, please.
With that, I do want to check on our liaison schedule. Sir, are you still good for December 18th?
yep.
Good. Commissioner Drummond, are you still okay for January 11th?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Horn, I have you down for January 25th. Does that still work for you?
Yes, it does.
Excellent. Commissioner Lind, February 8th.
Yep.
Does that still work? And, you know, normally, and I know I offered to cover recently and then I got pulled away. You know, generally, I'm here. So if any of you have some kind of a scheduling conflict, even if it's last minute, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll do my best to cover for you. With that, I will adjourn this meeting.
Don't you usually take a motion?
I will
Okay,
make
well,
that
there.
motion to
I
adjourn.
made that motion, I seconded, and I'm pretty sure, given the hour, it was overwhelmingly
I mean, the gavel has struck.
Accepted.
Unanimous.
Mark's got 10 minutes
So
to get
there.
to watch whatever show it is.
There. I grew up in West Philadelphia. I just hit the, just
West
like the
Philadelphia.
just like the Fresh Prince.